So when it comes to time, the most important thing about time and schedule is to be absolutely realistic with it. So you use your past experiences to inform these things for the future. So if you're working at the same venue over and over and over, you start to kind of know how long certain tasks take. For example, you know that stripping the front of house cove can be done by 3 people in 30 minutes. So don't budget it to be done by 2 people in 15 minutes. That seems like a totally common sense statement, but I'm sure most of you know that that's not common sense at all. Right? So use those past experiences to inform your future decisions and your future decision-making process when you're trying to figure out your timelines and your budgets and stuff like that. So you also need to examine the needs of every department. So obviously this is mostly true if you're a production manager. You need to know what every department is going to need. If you were with us for Zoom Beer last night, we talked a little bit about that and how being a production manager means you need to have a little bit of a skill set in each one of those areas so you know what's realistic and what each department needs. But I find as a lighting designer in the theater especially, it's also very true. So what we do in the theater is totally collaborative. If the scenic painter needs to have an extra hour with the work lights on and I'm in a good spot in my work, I absolutely I want to give them that hour to make their work better. So I think it's really important to know what other departments need and know how to kind of incorporate what you're doing with those other departments and try to work in harmony with those two things. And again, we just need to be aware of the scale of the project we're working on when we're budgeting that time. So how many of you have ever done two shows at the same theater before where you start, the first show is a 90-minute one act, and then a couple months later you go back and you do a two act full-length musical, right? But they budgeted the exact same amount of time for tech for both of those things. So many theaters, even theaters that I've worked in recently, they almost have like a Photoshop clone stamp tool that they're using on their calendars where they say, all right, well, it's time to do a show. We're going to take this exact same schedule and we're going to copy paste it into this show. And that's just not realistic, right? You have to have those conversations. So you have to have conversations as a theater company with your designers, with your collaborators to figure out what they're going to need. So the two big tools that I use, of course, to track my time is Google Calendar, which is pretty self-explanatory, but I also use a piece of software called Toggl. So Toggl I've been using for about 9 months now, and it's really awesome. It has lots of features, but the biggest one for me is it allows me to kind of precisely track my time on every single project that I'm doing. So earlier this year, I wrote a blog about that. You can see the link to that on your screens right now. You can also just go to my website and go to the blog and you'll find it. And I talk a little bit about how I use it. But what it's allowed me to do is track kind of to the minute and by task of what I'm doing for every single project. What that has allowed me to do is to compare project to project and see how much time I'm spending on any given thing. I can see, all right, well, on this show I drafted for X amount of hours, but on this show I drafted for this. And then I can start comparing my musicals to my straight plays. The thing that I found so far is how it's very interesting how similar a lot of the shows are. So a lot of the time I'm within, I've used this on 6 or 7 shows now, and I have been within, I'd say 8 to 10 hours on every single show of overall time, which is pretty cool. And it also then helps me to examine my fee structures. And I say, all right, well, I'm making X amount of dollars on this show. I can actually go back and look and see how much money I made hourly on this particular show. And so then it can help me make more informed decisions going forward about whether or not I want to accept a show for the same amount of money or at that same scope or scale. Good question here. I'll take this real quick. So what are some good tips for managing a situation where the production manager or TD is going to refuse to give you the time you need? For me, I just am very upfront in advance with what I'm going to need, and I find that with the scale of the theater that I'm working in a lot, it's not as much of an issue as it used to be for me. But I absolutely used to deal with that a lot, and for me, it was just being very vocal about it. And your second part of your question is like, how do you keep things amicable when you're doing that? You do that the best you can. You do it by not yelling. You don't stand up in the middle of tech and scream and say, I need more time. You try to foresee those situations happening before they come, right? You can look at that production schedule a month out in advance and be like, there's no way, I'm going to need more time. And you can have those friendly conversations with the production manager a month out way easier than you can have them in the heat of the moment in tech. Because once you're in that room, the chances of that schedule changing are very, very slim, because now you're dealing with overtime hours, you're dealing with all of that kind of stuff. Versus a month prior, if you point out, well, I would really like to have this extra couple of hours this day instead of this day, now the production managers can start making those decisions and start kind of figuring out how that's all going to work with budgets and with overtime and crew hours and stuff like that.